want you to give brief introduction so that we can get to know you
Mhm.
better, including sharing your diagnosis.
Awesome. Yes. Well, I'm Edgar Pacheco Jr. I am from the state of Texas, and I am diagnosed with a rare condition called tetra-amelia, which is the absence of the forelimbs. So no arms, no legs.
And now we're gonna talk more about your occupation, your special education advocate by trade. Can you tell us more about your career and the work you do?
Definitely, yes. So, I've been active in policy for a couple of years already, approximately 6 years now. I'm 24. I started in this arena, as we call it, at the age of 17. And when I started in the government realm, my idea was not necessarily to go in full on, full speed ahead, right? My goal was to just get some experience, go to school, start a career, and then maybe kind of go into that, right? Right. But I tell people all the time, I believe God has a plan and a purpose for everything. And when that occurred, when I went in, God opened up the doors and opportunities for me to kind of evolve and develop into the career that I have right now, which, as you mentioned, is a special education advocate. I've been doing this already for approximately 4 to 5 years. And what a special education advocate does really is they help guide the parents and the students within the public education system and educate them on their rights that they have under United States federal law. And so we help parents navigate the system. We help them see what the child needs. We help them advocate for what that child needs as well, and we help them kind of be a bridge, right, between the school district and the parents. And so I've been at that, working at that for 4 to 5 years already now. And on top of that, I've also been very actively involved, like I said, in the government realm, the policy arena, politics as well. And I first did start in politics, so I've worked multiple campaigns from the local level to the state level as well. I've ran some of my own campaigns as well. And then in between there, I've had the opportunity to go up to our state capital, which is Austin, Texas, and advocate at the legislative level for laws and bills that affect the lives of over 600,000 students with disabilities here in the state of Texas. And this has been already, I'm going on my fourth year already, so it's been 3 legislative sessions that I've been doing that already.
And you also mentioned in the interview that you made a history with the Edgar Pacheco Jr. Act. What does it mean to you to have the law named after you?
Well, I mean, it is very humbling for sure, because my goal going into that particular bill, right, was not to get any form of recognition. I tell people all the time, when I went in there, I had no clue what I was doing. I had no idea how the process worked. I mean, I had a vague understanding of how laws are made, right? Because ultimately, in order to be in politics, you have to have an understanding. But the actual process, the complexities behind it, right? The who do you need to talk to? What do you need to say? How do you need to say it? All of that you really kind of only get when you're, in that experience yourself. And so, for 7 weeks during that time frame, which was back in 2021, I was going between Austin and my hometown, which is a drive of about 3 hours or so, and just advocating week after week, going to different legislative offices, going to talk to their staffers, and educating them on the issue, right? And so what the bill did is it extended the statute of limitations, or the time period that a parent has to file a complaint, a special education complaint against a school district when they're not providing services to the child. And so after all was said and done, and we were able to get it passed, this was kind of a very impromptu uh, uh, I guess act, right? When the members of the Senate, the legislative body, they voted to amend the bill to name it the Edgar Pacheco Jr. Act. And I tell people, first and foremost, honor and glory goes to God, because like I said, I had no clue. I had no idea. But with God, all things are possible. And, through my faith, and through my beliefs, I was able to be led into what I needed to do, what I needed to say, and how I needed to say it in order to be able to get this bill over the finish line.
What advice would you give to young people with disabilities who want to get involved in advocacy or politics?
I guess the first advice I would give them is don't be afraid, because a lot of the times, individual with disabilities, we may get a little nervous, right? We may get a little, maybe a little bit of self-doubt also, because we may see that other people are quote unquote normal, right? And we're maybe kind of, a little bit on the outskirts, right? We may not look the same. We may not talk the same, even we may not think or process the same way, right? But nothing is ever going to change if we don't step out in faith, in boldness, and in action. And so the very first step is to take that step, right? If there's an idea that you have, if there's a dream that you have, right? How do you make that happen? How do you go and take that next step, right? Because a lot of the times we may have that next step in front of us, and we may have, kind of an idea of where to go, but we're too afraid to experience that rejection, or we're too afraid of people looking funny at us. And so you have to be bold, and you have to be courageous, and you have to be willing to step out first.
And what changes would you still like to see in the special education system in Texas?
Well, that's a loaded question, because that's a lot of changes that still need to be made in Texas. Most recently, we continue to work on financial transparency at the school district level, because here in Texas, we have approximately 1,200 school districts spread across the state, and each school district manages their own affairs. So it's not a centralized structure when it comes to finances, because a lot of the school districts are funded in part by the state, but in another part by local taxes as well. And so these local taxes are administered by the local school boards, who are elected, and they are the ones who administer pretty much everything and oversee the administration of the school district. But one of the things that we see very often in Texas is these school districts not wanting to provide services to students with disabilities, and instead of working to bridge the gap and meet these needs, right? Let's say that your student is asking for a special education evaluation, right? We're looking maybe at, $2,000, $3,000, right? That the school district has the money for, but they decide to go ahead and deny that, and parents are forced to file these complaints, and then you get attorneys involved. And so when you get attorneys involved, it starts costing money, and you have school district attorneys who are oftentimes charging between 300, 400, $500 an hour in order to advise their clients, the school districts, on how best to handle the case. And so the longer the case goes, the more money is spent on attorney's fees. And so right now, what we're hoping to do is shine a light on these attorney's fees, how much is being spent at the local school district level, in order to provide some transparency and ultimately provide some solutions so that school districts are able to meet and handle the needs of these students, versus just coming in and suing, right? Because it's a very counterproductive system, and if we don't do something about it, then it's just going to exacerbate it a lot more.
How does your faith guide your advocacy and daily life?
My faith guides pretty much everything in my life. I was blessed to have been born in a faith household, right, in a Christian household, where not just my parents were Christians, but my grandparents, my great grandparents, and so our faith has transcended generations. At the very least, I'm a fifth generation Christian already, and my faith has guided me every step of the way, because it goes to show that the human nature, our strength is limited, our understanding is limited, and without the revelation that is given to us, through Christ Jesus and his sacrifice, right? At least in my case, right, it would be a very different. I would be living a very different life, because when I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior, and when I decided to follow his footsteps, right, and follow in faith, right, it allowed me to see that there is more to this world than what I can see with my own eyes. There's more to this world, and there's much more purpose in my life than what I can see with my own eyes, because it's very easy to get in a rut, or in a situation where you're questioning your abilities, or you're questioning your limits, right? And why did this happen? What made it happen, right? And while those are very valid questions, right? And sometimes we have the answers, sometimes we don't, right? The only way to start living life is getting past those questions and asking yourself, how can I be of use to this world, right? How can I be of impact to others? And for me, right, my faith is what allowed me to not get in that mindset in the first place, but just move forward, and being led by the word of God and the Spirit, being able to see a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't have seen, right, if my mindset was on something completely different, right? And I would go as far as to say this: if my mindset was not set on my faith and Jesus, right, and what he did on the cross for me, for my sins, then it would be completely different, because I would be focusing on myself, and that's a very, very, very scary situation to be in.
And also, you have said the only limits we have are those that we place on ourselves. And
Mhm.
the interview that you had with Chris Elmer, can you share a time in your life when you had to remind yourself of that truth?
Definitely. I tell people all the time my parents were a little bit unorthodox when we were growing up, because instead of them feeling sorry for us, right? Instead of them kind of coddling, right? Or to an extent just separating us from the rest of the world, myself and my siblings, my parents were very, very adamant in, you can do it. You can, if you put your mind to it, if God is with you, you can do it, right? And so they never limited, at least myself, right, or my siblings, to doing something, because their model, their mindset was always, you can do it, not you can't do it, you're not worth it, or don't even think about it, right? And so when I was growing up, that's all I saw. That's the mentality I was raised in. And that being said, there was a particular couple times, right, when these I guess these beliefs really were put to the test, because as a person with a disability, at least in school, teachers don't see past your disabilities at point, right? Administrators don't see past the wheelchair, or don't see past, your limitations. And while everyone reacts differently to that, it really, it brought me down in parts, because I was so accustomed and so used to my parents always telling me I could do it, to then have someone put a barrier up and say you can't do it because of XYZ. It really, really it took me for a spin, as they say. And I decided, at that point, am I going to move forward and continue with what I learned, right, as a child growing up, or am I going to stay stuck in this particular spot? And so I decided, by the grace of God, first and foremost, that I wanted to keep going. And I reminded myself of those truths, right? Of not just, the faith and the values that were instilled in me, but also the fact that, there was only, the limits that I was going to place on myself were only going to bind me even more, versus just letting them go and letting everything go and just moving full speed ahead.
And if you could design the future of disability rights in Texas, what would it look like? Beside the financial burden.
Uh, it's there is, like I said, there's a lot of work to do, right? In special education. But as a whole, I think culturally speaking, there is some barriers still that we need to overcome, right? And part of the solution to that is getting people with disabilities to come out, getting people with disabilities to overcome their fear, right? And go out into the community, go out into into these professional workplaces, right? And I'm not saying that it's going to be easy at the get go, but the more people are out there, the more other individuals learn, and the more other individuals learn, the more of a culture shift occurs from one mindset of limited abilities to the mindset of different abilities. And then on top of that, right, policy is also part, here part of the solution, right? People with disabilities also need supports. They need services. And so in order to do that, the state government has to focus itself, right, on implementing policies that will not only secure these long-term programs, but secure long-term investment in these programs to make it sustainable for people with disabilities and their caretakers, right? To just receive some form of support, right? And that's another thing that we've done recently is work on attendant care wages here in the state of Texas, increasing it to a livable wage so that people who are helping people with disabilities or even the elderly, they're not living off of government subsidies either, right? Their work should be dignified and their work is worth it. And so there's, like I said, all around there's a lot of different things, right? But there has to happen a culture shift, and with that culture shift, policy changes have to happen.
And also, are there any other common passions or projects you would love to pursue one day, other than the tasks that you carry or execute as special education advocate by trade?
uh there is actually a couple, right? I mean, growing up, we were very involved, of course, in church, but we were also involved in choir and theater, my siblings and myself. And so I love singing. I love acting, I guess. I haven't really tried it as much, but that's something, I would want to pursue at some point. And just building relations, right? Building relations, with friends, right? And working on, whatever we can just to try and make this world a little bit better, and not just for people with disabilities, but for everyone else. And so, I mean, there's a couple of projects here and there that, like you said, there may be, maybe one day I write a book, who knows, just kind of detailing those experiences. But, all in all, I'm very blessed to be able to live this life. And I'm very excited to see what the future holds and, just go from there.
And the last question. If you could send one universal message to young people with and without disabilities around the world,
Mhm.
what would it be?
It would be it well it's similar to my previous message, but it would be to take courage. To don't let yourself be brought down by what other people say about you. You know, God made you the way you are for a purpose and a reason. And you have a plan and a purpose for this world. And whatever that plan is, whatever your situation is, you can overcome, because God has given us these abilities, and of course, first and foremost, through strength, and through believing in Him, right? But at the same time, if we take that action, right, if we take that step forward, nothing will be able to stop us. It's only like I said previously, the more you limit yourself, the more you limit yourself, the more difficult it's gonna be. And so don't limit yourself. Take courage, be bold, and go forth.